Alright everybody, we're going to have a bit of a different type of video today. Instead of actually reviewing stuff, we're going to talk about everything you need to know about grips in tennis. Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets Runners. So we have a bit of time before the next wave of rackets come in, so I really like the idea of making a more educational type of video because the grip is such an important part of a tennis racket. Picking the right grip is one of the easiest ways to personalize how well you feel holding your frame, which can obviously benefit playability. So today we're going to talk about everything from replacement grips to overgrips, but also the actual handle's shape and size and some of the customization you can do down there. Hopefully you enjoy the video. I know it's a little bit different to what you're used to. And of course, as usual, let me remind you that any of the products we talk about on this channel you can check out on our website, racketsandrunners.ca. Also, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me in the store on Instagram, and let me know in the comment section what you want me to cover next. We're going to start off with something that's often overlooked. I'm definitely guilty of it in some of these reviews. The racket's actual handle. The handle is completely independent to the actual grip. They're usually made from a hardened foam like this, and the important thing to note with the handle is that they come in a variety of different sizes, but also shapes. I think most people know that handles come in different sizes. If you go into a store, you'll see rackets labeled L1, L2, L3, 4 1/8, 4 1/4, etc. Those numbers represent different handle sizes. Many of you already know your handle size, but if you don't, you can either go into a store and have a professional help you out, or there's one tried and true method if you want to do it yourself. Take a hold of the racket like a hammer, and you want there to be about 1 finger's width between your fingertips and your palm. Now that's a good place to start, but it's also by no means your final scientific grip size. Personally, I prefer something a little bit smaller, and it has been the trend recently to go smaller in grip size. A smaller grip size gives you more of an ability to pronate your wrist, which is great for power and spin generation, but you do lose out on some stability, so if you are buying your first racket, it's best to stick to the 1-finger method. Now let's talk about handle shape, because it's very important, especially if you're used to a certain shape from a specific brand and you want to switch to a new racket. At the store, we carry Technifiber, Yonex, Head, Wilson, Babolat, and Dunlop. I'm going to separate the shapes into 2 categories: Yonex, Babolat, and Technifiber, and Head, Wilson, and Dunlop. The first 3 have a more rectangular shape to them. Babolat and Yonex are actually quite similar, but Technifiber is a bit more oval. If you did play with older Head rackets from more than 10 years ago, it's basically an identical shape to those. It's pretty much the TK82 shape for those of you who know your Head palette codes. Head, Wilson, and Dunlop have very square handles. They're all quite similar, so this is what I would call the most standard shape, and it does work quite well for a lot of people. The most important thing to remember here is that once you get used to a specific shape, it will take some time to adjust to another one, so just make sure you demo a racket, especially if you're switching between those 2 groups I just mentioned. Now there are also different handle lengths. This has become much less of an issue nowadays because so many players use two-handed backhands that brands know they have to make handles longer, but something like the Pro Staff 97 is still pretty short. But anyways, the handle is just something you should keep in mind. Try not to worry too much about it because you will eventually get used to whatever shape you choose. But now let's move on to replacement grips. Replacement grips are the grips that go directly on the handle. They're not to be confused with overgrips, which go on top of the replacement grips, which we'll talk about later. Replacement grips come stock on any racket, and they are extremely important to use because without them, the handle feels way too stiff. They add about 1 to 2 millimeters of cushioning. There are some people who go straight overgrip on the handle. I would never do that, and I like a firm feel to my grip, so I definitely don't recommend it. Now, as you can imagine, there are a variety of different replacement grips. I'm going to start with the category of standard replacement grips. These are generally the same ones that come stock on a new racket, and they're standard because they're synthetic, they have a standard feel, a standard thickness, and they either come with perforations or without. Perforated replacement grips are more moisture wicking because they allow heat to escape. These do work decently well, but there are more effective options if you have really sweaty hands, which we'll talk about in the overgrip section. Now within standard replacement grips, there is a bit of variety. I like a firmer feel for my replacement grip, so whenever I'm not using a leather grip, I go for something like Syntec Pro, which is a little bit firmer than Head Hydroabsorb Pro, for example. Let's move on to shaped grips. This is a style of grip that has lost a lot of popularity over the years, but some people still swear by them. Shaped grips will have some sort of texture built into them to give the handle a unique feel. The one I'm holding here is Wilson Cushion Air Classic Contour, and it basically has a tube going through the middle of the grip, which gives the handle a very ribbed feel, and some players really like that because they can use it as a reference point to know exactly where their hand is. Personally, I find that these shaped replacement grips add a little bit too much shape. There are other shapes as well, but I find that an overgrip adds just the right amount of texture, and this is a little bit too intense, but we'll talk more about that in the overgrip section. Now we're going to move on to really thin replacement grips, which are a fantastic option if you do end up choosing a racket with a grip size that's too big, or if you want to experiment with a smaller grip size before committing to a new racket. The most common ultra-thin replacement grip is Wilson Feather Thin. It'll bring the grip size down somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of a size in my experience, depending on how much you stretch it. Please be extremely careful when you're applying it though, it breaks ridiculously easily. The first time I applied a Feather Thin, it took me about 4 tries to get it right. But like I said, it's great if you want to make the handle smaller. It's also great if you want a firmer feel to your handle because it's obviously less cushion than the other grips I just talked about, but there is one grip that's even better for that. Finally, we get to leather grips. This is going to be my favorite part of this video because I get to talk in detail about leather grips, why they're so awesome, why you should choose them, and I definitely have a lot of experience with these. Longtime viewers of the channel will know that I'm a bit of a leather grip addict. I tend to put them on almost all my rackets, and the number one reason I like leather grips so much is because they feel firmer than synthetic grips. What that provides is much better handle feel because it accentuates the bevels, and it also transfers feedback more efficiently from the racket into your hand. I also just realized that the Pro Staff I showed you earlier looks like it has a leather grip on it. It's not, that's a synthetic grip that's made to look like a leather grip. I don't really know why Wilson did that, but yeah, sorry for the confusion. Synthetic grips are fine, but they can be a little bit soft and mushy, and because of that, I've always found that a racket wrapped with a leather grip just feels a little bit more premium. Fair warning though, it will take you a bit of time to get used to that firmer feel. You'll go through a few blisters, but eventually your hands will callus and you'll be used to it. Leather grips are also a great customization tool because they're heavier than synthetic grips. They add somewhere between 7 and 10 grams depending on the grip and also the length and size of your handle. That extra weight makes for a significant boost in stability, and because of that, I put leather grips on pretty much all my 95 to 98 square inch rackets that have a static weight between 305 and 315. Do be careful with this. If you apply a leather grip to a racket that's already quite heavy, you could make it super clunky, but you're not adding much, if any, swing weight, so generally you should be fine. If you do want to replicate the feel of a leather grip without adding the weight, this is also where Wilson Feather Thin is quite good. It's not as firm as leather, but does accentuate the bevels quite well, so it is a good option. Now, leather grips also tend to be thinner than standard replacement grips. I say tend to because that's not always true. Something like Head Leather Tour is pretty thick for a leather grip, but in general they will make the handle about 1/4 of a size smaller. Applying a leather grip is also quite difficult. You need to pull on it pretty hard, so if you haven't done one of these before, I would highly recommend watching a professional do it for you for the first time. Now, a properly applied replacement grip, whether it's synthetic or leather, will lie flush on the handle. There won't be any overlaps. If you do want a tutorial about this, I could definitely make one, but there are some great ones out there already, so just let me know in the comments. Overgrips are pretty self-explanatory. You apply them over the replacement grip. Unlike replacement grips, these don't come stock on new rackets, so you have to buy them, and they either come in a pack of 3 or way more than that if you need a lot. Now, overgrips serve 2 purposes. One, they conserve the replacement grip so that you don't need to change it. You should change an overgrip pretty often, which is why they come in a pack of 3 at minimum. The main purpose of an overgrip, though, is that they allow each player to better customize the feel they have for the handle. They come in a variety of different textures, dry, tacky, and a nice blend of the two, which I'm going to call standard overgrips. Choosing between these 3 types basically comes down to how much you sweat. 80% of people will go for a standard overgrip because it soaks up a bit of moisture without being uncomfortably dry, and it's still quite tacky. These are grips like Wilson Pro Overgrip, Yonex Super Grip. They're by far the most common. Most of the time you see a white grip on a racket, it's probably a standard overgrip. They do come in a variety of different colors though. We recently got a huge batch of teal ones, which I think look really good, so I started using them in videos. But I actually prefer a different type of overgrip. You've probably seen this in a lot of my hitting footage. I use a purple overgrip that definitely stands out from the rest. That's Torna Original, more commonly known as Torna Grip. It's the most popular dry grip. Dry grips are best for players who sweat a lot. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but think of a dry grip a bit like a chamois, as you get it wet, it gets very gritty and actually sticks to your palm quite effectively. If you've ever used Turn-A-Grip, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and if this is a style of overgrip that works for you, you'll have a very difficult time using anything else. The more you sweat, the better it is, so for a player like me who sweats a ton, I use it religiously in the summer, but I would not recommend using it if you don't sweat a lot. Dry hands combined with this sandy, dry finish can feel very uncomfortable. It's quite abrasive to the point where you'll probably get blisters, so I would only recommend dry overgrips if you're really sweaty. There are a couple other types of dry overgrips. I know Luxilon makes one, but we don't carry it. Babolat VS Original is also decent, but honestly, the king of dry overgrips is and probably always will be Turn-A-Grip. Now, I am going to talk about sticky overgrips because I know a select number of people really swear by them, but you people are weird. Just kidding. I'm not really kidding. Sticky overgrips sound like a great idea, but they're so sticky that they feel kind of weird in your hands, and they get really gross over time. That stickiness also turns into a slip and slide once it comes into contact with any moisture, so if you sweat at all, these won't work for you. I think they do work for players with really dry hands, but otherwise, just go for a standard overgrip. They're still plenty tacky and just feel more natural altogether. Now, overgrips also add texture to a handle. They don't sit flush like replacement grips. You're actually supposed to overlap as you apply them, which creates a similar sensation to what ribbed replacement grips are supposed to do. This overlap is way more natural than that really intense ribbed feel though, so more people go in this direction. You can see the way I wrap my overgrip, it gives a really nice handle feel and a good reference point for where I am on the racket. Now this is a really standard way of wrapping an overgrip, but because an overgrip is so malleable and flexible, you can also play around with different feels and styles of wrapping it. One wrapping method that has become very popular recently is adding size to the butt cap. You can fold the grip in half, wrap it around a few times, and that makes the butt cap protrude a lot more like this compared to a more standard one like that. Some people take this to the extreme. Richard Gasquet is an example of a player who's been doing this his whole career, and it seems like that butt cap is getting bigger and bigger every year. That's about it for overgrips. They really are something you should experiment with because at the end of the day, they're your contact point with the racket, so making sure that connection is as comfortable as possible is really important. I don't want to spend too much time here talking about customization with the handle because that could be a whole separate video, but I did just want to say the handle is a great place to add weight. We talked about this a bit with leather grips and how because they add 7 to 10 grams, they provide a boost in stability, but you're not limited to a leather grip for that. There are many methods of adding weight to the handle. You can wrap lead strips under the replacement grip, you can insert silicone into the handle via the butt cap, or throw balls of lead or putty or whatever material you think could work in there. If you are interested in a video where I talk more specifically about how to do this and the benefits of adding weight to the handle, I could definitely do that, so just let me know in the comments. Now obviously lead, silicone, putty, they allow you to be more precise about the amount of weight you add to a racket compared to a leather grip, so they're great if you're trying to get to a target weight spec or balance, or if you're trying to match rackets. Remember, adding weight to the handle is great for stability. It makes for a more headlight balance, so it makes the racket a little more whippy, and it usually doesn't add swing weight, so you're not going to make it harder to use. But yeah, that's about it in terms of everything you need to know about handles and grips. I did not think this was going to be another super long video, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, everything about a tennis racket is as complex as you want to make it, but hopefully I was able to help shed some light on this topic. With that said, that is going to be the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that if you want to check out any of the products we talk about on this channel, you can visit us online at racketsandrunners.ca.